It's very hard to know what's going on inside the administration because people tend to talk out of both sides of their mouth. And when you're talking about President Trump, he says one thing one day and something else another day. But I think there is evidence that they are thinking, and certainly President Trump is thinking about just trying to walk away from this. Whether he succeeds is another matter.
It seems to me that the options are either go back to the Biden era and start giving them ammunition, weapons, and not Keith Kellogg, Jack Keane has been advocating for that even in the last few days, or he just does nothing, or he walks away. I mean, do you see a third option there or a fourth option?
I think those are his options. He's screwed. He's screwed on Russia. He's screwed on Iran. He's screwed on Gaza. I mean, he has no solution to these problems, at least that I can see. I think it's most likely that he will let the Ukrainians fight this out with the Russians. He will not give them much more support. And the Russians will win and there'll be a frozen conflict. But it is also possible, given the pressure on him, that he will end up as Biden too. But that will just slow down the time it takes the Russians to win this war, because the Russians were winning the war when Biden was providing the Ukrainians with all the possible support he could give them. And if Trump follows in Biden's footsteps, it's not going to matter. The Russians are going to win. And this is due in large part to the fact that what's happening to the Ukrainian military is disastrous. And the problem here is not only artillery and other kinds of weaponry, it's also personnel. They just don't have the troops.
Right.
And they can't mobilize enough people to make up for all their losses. And the Russians are doing a terrific job of mobilizing troops. So you have a situation, I would bet, where the Russians have something on the order of 3-1, a 3-1 overall advantage on the Eastern Front. And when you think about the quality of the troops on both sides, it's quite clear the Russians have a significant advantage there as well. They're better trained. They've had more R&R.
Right.
And they've not taken the pounding that the Ukrainian forces are taking. So I think there's, even if Trump decides to be Joe Biden too, in the end, it's just not going to matter.
Yeah,
so this war.
I want to shift gears in the remainder of the time we have. I don't want to let you go without the opportunity, because Trump did just tweet on it. Gary, if you could put that True Social back up, you can see he shifted gears about the halfway through there. He said, we also discussed Iran and the fact that time is running out on Iran's decision pertaining to nuclear weapons, which must be made quickly. I stated to President Putin that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. And so he claims here, on this, I believe that we are in agreement. President Putin suggested that he will participate in the discussions with Iran and that he could perhaps be helpful in getting this brought to a rapid conclusion. It is my opinion that Iran has been slow walking their decision on this very important matter, and we will need a definitive answer in a very short period of time anywhere. How do you interpret those events there? And because you mentioned at the outset that this is one of the areas where we're in a bad situation here, does this change any of that?
No, this just shows you that Trump is desperate. He's asking Putin for help. Would you, Vladimir, help me solve the Iran nuclear problem? The nub of the problem is that the administration, because of pressure from Israel and its supporters in the United States, insists that Iran give up its nuclear enrichment capability. The Iranians have said under no circumstances will they give up their nuclear enrichment capability. Well, how do you solve that problem? The Americans have been trying to come up with clever schemes. They just came up with one clever scheme. I won't go into details. And the Iranians rejected it today. So we're back to, square one. And we have no solution. The Israelis and their lobby here in the United States will not allow President Trump to allow the Iranians to have enrichment capability. And that has to be the case if you're going to get a deal. There has to be some concession to the Iranians that they can keep their enrichment capability with certain limits, of course. But we can't do that. So Trump is in a position where if he can't do that, he's promised he would bomb Iran. Good luck on that one. That would be a disaster. Trump, of course, understands that. His principal advisors understand that. And he doesn't want to bomb Iran. He wants to work out a deal, but he can't work out a deal. So he goes to Putin and he says, Mr. Putin, would you please help me? Would you please help pull my chestnuts out of the fire on Iran? That's what he's asking for.
And so what's your expectation of what the answer is that going to be from Putin?
First of all, Putin is not going to put any pressure on Iran to make concessions to the United States. It's just not. And if he did, the Iranians would ignore those concessions. It's very important to understand that what the United States has done here through its foolish strategy, both in the Biden administration and the Trump administration, is push the Iranians, the Russians, the Chinese, and the North Koreans together. They all understand full well that the United States is a mortal enemy. I'm choosing my words carefully here. From a Russian, Chinese, North Korean, and Iranian perspective, the United States of America is a mortal enemy. In that situation, you want to work together. You do not want to turn, if you're the Russians, you do not want to turn on the Iranians. And if you're the Iranians, you want to work with the Russians, you don't want to turn on them. So the Russians and the Iranians have a deep-seated interest in working together. And Putin would be a fool to help Trump solve the Iran problem. What would he gain from it? Iranian.
Well, yeah, that's the part that I was trying to figure out, because where is the motivation for Putin to say, look, I'm going to make life easier for President Trump. That's what I want to do, even though we're fighting this war over here and you're facilitating a lot of it, even to this day, with some of the leftovers from the Biden deals that's still going into Russia. So I found it to be a bit peculiar of an ask.
Yeah, but again, he's desperate. I think you cannot underestimate how much trouble Trump is in. If again, go back to Gaza, look at Iran, go back to talking about Ukraine. He does not have solutions, and every one of these problems moving forward looks almost worse than it looks like now. There's just
let me ask you one other thing related to that, which just happened since the last time you were on our show, is we had Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth go into the Shangri-La Defense Security Forum and make this straight up claim that President Trump will not allow China to take Taiwan. And then he went on just a minute or two later and said, and if called upon, my defense department will fight and decisively win any battle. What does that do to this calculation in the Asia Pacific?
Well, as I said early on, the fact that we're bogged down in Ukraine and can't get out, the fact that we're bogged down in the Middle East, both with regard to Gaza and with regard to Iran, all of this just weakens our position in East Asia. If you're interested in containing China, which the administration says is the number one threat facing the United States, the last thing you want to do from a strategic point of view is get pinned down in the Middle East and in Europe. That's what we've done, and we're unable to get out. We're unable to get out of those two regions and fully pivot to East Asia. Indeed, if you look at the naval and air assets we've moved out of East Asia and sent to the Middle East, you scratch your head and say, isn't this weakening our deterrent posture in East Asia? And of course, the answer is yes. By the way, one of the reasons that we stopped the war against the Houthis, remember, Donald Trump said he was going to win a great war against the Houthis. He was going to defeat them quickly and decisively. Well, that didn't happen. And Trump quit the war after 30 days. And why did he do that? Because we were expending so much precious ammunition that was needed in East Asia in the war against the Houthis that we just had to put an end to it. We had to preserve that ammunition for a possible fight in East Asia. So,
and then we had Secretary Rubio admit in Senate testimony about 2 weeks ago that he says, yeah, one of the things that Zelensky keeps asking us for is more air defense weapons and Patriots. And he said, we don't have any. We don't have any to give. And not not many people in the rest of Europe do either. So that's also showing it, revealing to anyone who cares on the other side that we're limited on our capacity, much less our production capacity to sustain a conflict. That's not looking good. That doesn't help us anywhere. And I agree with you. I think you're right. I mean, we're in trouble across the board. In the last few minutes that we have here, I wonder if the president was watching our show, and I hope he does. What would you say to him? What can he do now, aside from whatever pressures he got from Warhawks or anything else? But since he is the president and the commander-in-chief, what could he do now to get us out of this fix?
Danny, before I answer that, I just want to go back to the Taiwan scenario and what Hegseth said. He said that we would win a war. There's no chance we would win a war against China. But the one thing we've learned from the Ukraine war is that when you get into a war that you don't win quickly and decisively, and it becomes a protracted war, having a powerful manufacturing base so you can pump out weaponry really, really matters. This is the great advantage that the Russians have in Ukraine over the United States and its European allies. We don't have a meaningful industrial base that you can wage a traditional conventional war with. Now, to go back to the Taiwan scenario, China has that manufacturing base and we don't. So if we get into a war with China in East Asia, and let's hope we don't, we're going to be at a tremendous disadvantage because in a war of attrition, we don't have a formidable manufacturing base to produce lots of weaponry, and they do. So you don't want to lose sight of that. Now, back to your question, what should President Trump do? I'm not sure what I would tell him to do at this point in time. I mean, I'm not sure there's any clear way out for him, even if he behaves smartly. I think that, with regard to the Middle East, and here we're talking about Iran and Gaza, he has his hands largely tied because of the Israel lobby. Israel basically has more votes in Congress than President Trump does. And it's almost impossible for him to take on the Israelis. And that would be necessary to get out of the mess we're in Gaza and to solve the Iran problem. He may decide to take on the lobby and to take on Israel, but I would not bet a lot of money on it. I would certainly tell him that that's what he should do, but it's easy for me to say that because I'm sitting here in Chicago, not in the White House. With regard to Ukraine, I would tell him to put huge pressure on the Ukrainians and on the Europeans to accept the deal now, as would you. But do you think the Europeans and the Ukrainians are going to listen to us or listen to President Trump? I think the answer is no. And not only would he take heat from the Europeans and the Ukrainians for pushing that policy, he'd also take heat from all sorts of people inside the United States. Because as you well know, this country is filled with super hawks. It's filled with Russophobes. So I think politically, it's almost impossible for him to take the steps that are necessary to solve the two big problems in the Middle East or to shut down the war in Ukraine.